Yo, let's see if we get some audio going. Test appears to be working. All right. So I'm gonna get this set up. Hang on, just you can't bump the table because the camera is sitting there. And I got it on the right angle to not lose the focus.
Okay. So that's for the Bitcoin Cash Fund.
Can you go on my stream and have a look if it's working? Just like what the screen looks like.
What's your stream?
Open it from Telegram.
Yeah, it's looking good. It's looking good. All right.
Let's see what the delay is like.
Oh, sorry, I turned it off.
It's all good. Don't worry. You just can't bump this.
Cool.
Otherwise, it'll move.
Right, I think. Shall we kick it off?
Yep.
Is everybody?
Yep.
Dang.
Peter and Rob probably coming too.
Okay, so we have a few more who might be coming soon. But welcome to the 5th Bitcoin Cash meetup in Brisbane. It's an awesome run that we've been having. Tonight we have a couple of presentations. First from Hayden, which is on the corporate takeover of Bitcoin and the whole reason that Bitcoin Cash was created. So he's going to go into some details of that. And I think, were you going to do some updates from CoinGeek?
Oh yeah, probably just briefly.
Sure. So I have a more in-depth update of a lot of the tech announcements from CoinGeek, which I will go through. And then at the end of that, we can do maybe some tech talk. I was thinking a good topic to discuss might be how Bitcoin transactions actually work and what is a Bitcoin? What does it mean when you receive Bitcoins into your wallet? And what does that look like to the network? And how does your wallet use those Bitcoins to pay people and move money? So, after we've done the two presentations, we can do a bit of a talk on that. So I'll hand it over to Hayden for the first talk.
Apparently some people might need help getting up the lift or something.
Okay, yeah, we've got some people stuck downstairs. So. Sorry for the delay, everyone on the streams. And on that one.
Don't worry about it, it's all good.
We'll get started very shortly.
How many people are down there?
Oh, it's just Peter. Can you go back to the other one?
The stream?
See if it's just coming up correctly.
Yeah. Sure, man.
I just want to see if it's got the right picture quality. Or if I need to adjust. That looks good. Looks fine.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is it's possibly a little bit dark, but I like to think this thing
it
is
was
so
just
bright.
getting modified when someone stands right in front of the camera. So it's
No, but the quality is good.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh wow, the delay is like...
No, it's fine. Ready to go.
Awesome.
Hopefully I can get back up. It's a bit of a problem there. Make sure you check your phone. Because I don't have a key for you anymore, actually.
Okay. I've got no one on my... I hope Liam hasn't managed to lock himself out. So fast, hey.
Oh my God. Apparently it's locked because they didn't come before 6:30. The elevator.
Oh, so has Liam's gone downstairs and won't let him back in? Are the traffic light guys still up there? Okay, we're just having a bit of trouble here. We've got some people who are stuck outside, so we're just trying to get them into the building. They've revamped security. Right. All right. I've got some. He's paying out stickers all over the floor. Actually, let's wait until everyone gets up here until we do the prizes. What do you reckon? Should we do trivia?
Yeah.
We'll try and think of
Not
it.
too techy.
Not too techy. Now, I really need you guys to start taking more stickers. Because every month they send me a huge pile. Yeah.
We have sorted it out.
We have sorted it out. All right. So here's the videos. Okay. Video set to private. What have I managed to have? It's public. Great. Thank you, Monica. We're just trying to get some people into the building. They've revamped our security, and people going down to let other people in actually got themselves locked out. So we've got half a dozen people coming in the next few minutes. So please bear with us.
We haven't started yet. We're just waiting for you to come in.
You know the Tugun bypass? Oh yeah, well, I mean, well, I guess the bypass goes around Tugun. Because the Pacific Highway used to go straight up the guts of Tugun and had all these lights, and they've just tunneled under the hill. And so now you just go vroom, straight through. So the good people of Tugun get lots less traffic. So are they getting back in?
Yes.
Our apologies for the late start, everybody.
Why is he calling?
Hello? I can't hear you, man. Hello, Liam. What's up, man? Can you get in? This is a disaster. Half of our audience is stuck outside the building.
Well, how are you going to get up here? Well, is anyone else going to help you get up the other?
Excuse me. Do you have the capability to get people into the building?
Yeah.
We have half a dozen people stuck.
Yeah. Can you let them up that lift? There's like a gas leak over them, they can't get up through those lifts, so they need to come through that one. Sure. Thanks, you're a
Thank you
lifesaver.
so much, man.
They're on ground.
There's a gas leak. That's crazy.
I don't know, they said those lifts they can't get up for that reason.
The plot thickens. There's a gas leak in the lifts, apparently. Yeah. So I guess they're at the other lifts over there. So we're trying to get them up this lift. So the nice gentleman who just came out up there is going down, and he's going to bring him back up. Yeah. So he has the all access pass, which we really need to get sorted for next time, I think.
The one that's on its own, yeah, just went down. Very quick, very quick.
So Peter's down there? There's Discord saying they don't mind. Okay, good. I don't think this probably.
Is that it?
That was it. There was
no one else
They've been calling people from maintenance to come over.
Yeah, probably. Oh, who cares?
Well, hopefully it doesn't turn into something else. Grab a drink. Come and sit.
All right.
All right.
This event is about to get started.
Turn that off.
Finally. Okay.
And just if there are any questions during the talk, just let me know and I'll give you the microphone so that people listening to the streams can hear.
Okay, so this is kind of following on from the recent debate we had in Brisbane where I made some claims that some people try to dismiss as being just conspiracy, but it's actually a conspiracy theory, but it's actually conspiracy fact if you go and do some research. It's not very hard to connect the dots with the evidence that's out there about some things that have been going on with Bitcoin over the last couple of years. And I'm here to just help you guys connect the dots and provide you with a bit of evidence. Basically get you thinking about what is going on here and then you can also go and supplement the information I tell you here today by going and doing your own research. And that's the main point of today's talk. So let's get things kicked off. To understand the whole situation here, you first of all need to understand a bit of a timeline of events. So in 2011, Satoshi Nakamoto handed over control of Bitcoin GitHub repository to Gavin Andresen. And at this point, Satoshi had said that the project is now in good hands, and both of these individuals understood that Bitcoin, the only way that it could scale for global adoption is by increasing the block size. Then, over the next 3 years, Gavin allowed commit access to the Bitcoin repository to 4 individuals, one of those being Gregory Maxwell, and he was not a believer in scaling on-chain. This is when they started devising the plan for sidechains and eventually the Lightning Network. So in 2014, Gavin actually stepped down as the lead developer, and somebody else took over that role. At the end of 2014, the company known as Blockstream was founded, and that is when Bitcoin, that was the start of Bitcoin no longer being a currency, global currency for the people. It's now owned by a company, and they are creating solutions as a company to sell for corporate interests. Shortly after that, Blockstream announced that they planned to introduce monetized sidechains to Bitcoin, and they were seeking investments from outside sources. And a month later, essentially, they were able to raise $21 million in their seed funding round. And this is all openly admitted on their own website. You can go and read a lot of other info on the blogs that they published on the Blockstream website. 6 months later, in June 2015, Gavin concluded with his last work on Bitcoin. He proposed an increase to the block size limit, and obviously these other individuals who are now in charge of the Bitcoin repository did not agree with that. So this was also the start of the block size and scaling debate. This is where things started to heat up, and groups like the miners were all requesting at least an increase to about 8 megabytes at that point. May 2016, or May the 2nd, Gavin Andresen wrote a blog post where he claimed that Satoshi Nakamoto was actually Dr. Craig Wright. And this was met with a lot of opposition, and they said, many people were claiming that he had actually been hacked, and this post that was on his website was not written by Gavin. And in response to this, they took away all his administrator rights on GitHub, and he didn't have commit access any longer after that date. The next day, on May the 3rd, 2016, Gavin was speaking at Consensus, the CoinDesk conference, and he said that he had not been hacked, and he even repeated the claims that he made the day before on his website. Despite all of this, they did not re-enable his access to the GitHub, and he still hasn't had any kind of involvement with the Bitcoin GitHub to this date.
So, was his access revoked the day that he released that blog post?
Yes, it was.
Wow.
Yeah, and he even clarified the next day, yeah, I haven't been hacked. And they didn't bring it back on. It was a coup d'etat. So yeah, you can even read about this. There's a news article here. There's even a post on his own website I've linked here. And yes, once they did this, they had total control over the direction of Bitcoin up until today as we know it.
So how many people were working on the repository at that time?
or there was maybe like 5 other individuals, I believe. And yeah, they were all the Blockstream employees at that point, except Gavin. So now I ask the question to you, if you were a central bank or government, how would you stop this unstoppable technology that's known as blockchain? The technology that was flourishing online since its creation in 2008 up until this point. Normally in the past, we've seen things like the e-cash, and it's been squashed pretty much instantly by the banks because it poses a threat to their business model and what they do. But Bitcoin was different, stuck around. There was only one way to take down this particular technology. It was through bribery and corrupting it from within. So the 3 main things that they've done here, I've got in bullet points. They've corrupted the system from within through bribery or investments. They make it seem legitimate. Oh yeah, we just invested in this company, but really there's a lot more behind that. And then they use divide and conquer tactics from the art of war. They divided the community, and they've pitted individuals in this community against each other so that they're distracted and weakening themselves when the greater threat is actually allowed to get away with the things that they're doing here. And the greater threat is the real enemy of the peer-to-peer electronic cash system, which is central banks and government. So they also participate in mass online censorship campaigns, and they slander the individuals that expose the corruption and individuals who are presenting logical arguments that make sense against them. And simultaneously, they elevate those individuals who are unwittingly fighting for them, whether they realize it or not, whether they've been paid off to do so or not. I think for the most part, they're people that literally just don't have a clue, and they're useful idiots, essentially, fighting for the wrong side. So there's a lot of problems with Blockstream that can be seen from their actions over the last couple of years. The CTO, Samson Mao, has stated publicly that Bitcoin isn't for people that live on less than $2 a day, in response to the rising transaction fees that were in some cases surpassing hundreds of dollars. I think on average it got to about $50 or something like that last year. I myself was paying some that were over $150 just to send a transaction, just to withdraw my Bitcoin from the exchange.
I actually went back and looked through, and there were some blocks where the average transaction price in entire blocks was way over, over $150.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. And basically what this did was it crippled Bitcoin. It became unusable. No merchant wanted to use this as a payment method they accepted anymore. I personally stopped using it. I was spending it at all these stores down here in the valley every day, and I stopped using it in protest. But yeah, that was the consequence of doing that, capping the block size at 1 megabyte. And obviously transactions couldn't be processed in each block, so people were competing by sending a higher fee to get their transaction processed quicker. Now, what this group also stated publicly was that Bitcoin is no longer peer-to-peer electronic cash, and you shouldn't be spending it. And they demonized anyone who wanted to use this as cash. And they said it's actually a store of value like digital gold, and you're going to use coins like Litecoin for everyday payments and all this other crap. But really, they had their own investments in these coins, and I suspect also that they've likely been paid off behind the scenes from these coins, because they just pre-mine a bunch of coins at the start, and then they've got money to fund their own interests, and they probably said, hey, we'll give you X amount of this coin, or a few $1 million, if you go and support this agenda. Because you've got to think, these developers, they're not rich just because they were working on Bitcoin in the early days. They're not loaded. Some of them did invest money in there, but many of them were just working on it as a hobby. It wasn't something that was paying them, because it is totally decentralized with no entity that was governing it at that point and in control of funding the project. So, yeah, this group intentionally crippled Bitcoin, and that destroyed its first mover advantage. You can see that by looking at all the charts, like the total market dominance. It went down from about 90% to 30% while Blockstream was in charge. And that allowed the altcoins to rise up and challenge it. As we know today, it's become a bit of an issue if you're just into Bitcoin, because the market's been saturated. There's no need for all these other currencies. And I believe that if this group didn't take over and get their way, then altcoins would be pretty much all but irrelevant today. Also, the Lightning Network is basically a solution to keep the banks relevant, which I'll explain a bit later. Blockstream supporters and proponents, they have a history of attacking individuals who are speaking out against them, and the products that they are wanting to develop, their roadmap. Most of the time it's fairly obvious online that they just focus every day on attacking people like Roger Ver, who is in fact Bitcoin's greatest promoter and investor, I would say, and I'm sure everyone would agree with that. And they also love to attack miners like Bitmain. But if you really understand how this system works, that you can understand that that is incorrect to be doing, because this is an ecosystem where miners are supporting the network, users are supporting the network, and in turn, it creates a healthy ecosystem where we're all helping each other out. And there's no reason for these groups to be, working against one another.
I wonder what's going to happen to that narrative now that we have, I think, 8 implementations of the Bitcoin Cash node. So there's a lot of talk that Maurice Sachet is the guy behind Bitcoin. Well, now he's just the lead dev of one of 8 Bitcoin Cash full node implementations. We now have, I think, 4 different companies manufacturing SHA-256 assets for mining Bitcoin. So the ecosystem is rapidly changing and really making that argument completely redundant.
Yeah, and the big attack on the ASICs I found quite funny, because it's literally just a matter of an innovation that allowed these miners to optimize their returns, and they're not withholding that technology to themselves. You're free to go and buy it if you want to. And all of a sudden, all these coins are making themselves ASIC resistant and stuff like that, but it's just total garbage.
It's like taxi drivers attacking the train.
They're just hurting themselves in the long run. So, yeah. And yeah, today, as we know it, there is a non-stop onslaught of attacks against anyone supporting Bitcoin Cash itself. The core supporters did claim last year, when we split off from Bitcoin, to pursue the original plan of scaling on chain through increasing the block size. They said that we would die immediately, and they even were, instead of getting their Lightning Network ready, they were developing software which allowed users to go and sell their Bitcoin Cash as soon as it appeared in the wallet on exchanges. It would just automatically do that, so you could get out before everyone else dumped on it. And if you did that, you've been proven very wrong and you're at a great loss, because the price now is many times more than it was at the point which they said to sell.
And thank you.
Yeah. So there's a lot more stuff that's wrong with this group. They've received $76 million in funding to date that we know of, because you don't know all the behind the scenes deals and investments through other cryptocurrencies to pursue their agendas, such as the 1 megabyte block size cap, which allowed other altcoins to grow and challenge Bitcoin, their segregated witness, and of course the Lightning Network, which is the main focus at the moment. Because once they got the segregated witness in, it was basically locked down and allowed them to implement this final phase. The next problem I have is, this is the very crucial point to make, the part where they say it's conspiracy theory. Go do some research. These investments mostly came from corporations with interest to oppose the peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So the big one is AXA Strategic Ventures, who invested $55 million US, and whose CEO is actually the chairman of Bilderberg currently, and he's been in that position since 2012. And I'll talk more about Bilderberg in a moment. And the next major investor is Digital Currency Group, or DCG, some might call it, and they are funded by MasterCard and Amazon Web Services, just to name a few companies. Their CEO is Barry Silbert, who is an ex-investment banker. So these are the people who are pulling the strings on Bitcoin from the top. Do you really want to be invested in a currency that's aiming to supposedly challenge these systems when they're in fact now controlled by the system it claims to oppose? That's what's happened, and so many people have fallen for these tricks. So what's the Bilderberg Group? I'll let you do most of the research here because it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but essentially it's a secretive collective of global elites who meet annually to expand their power over all other humans on this planet. And they have plants or people in positions of power in pretty much all governments, all multinational corporations, and also especially the banks. So if you want to go and get the definitive guide on that, there's a very good documentary by a bloke named Alex Jones, and it's called Endgame, a plan for global enslavement, or something like that. But it's free to watch on YouTube, Alex Jones Endgame, you search that up. And now I've got here just a link which illustrates to you a few of, well, someone's put together this chart which is showing all the groups that are tied to the Bilderberg Group, and it's so massive, like can't fit it all on one screen. But here are some of the bigger ones on the left. You can see it's got like McDonald's, FedEx, Microsoft, Apple, pretty much all the big companies you know about are on here. Google, Citigroup, banks, Disney, AXA, who we mentioned before, a lot of news outlets like Washington Post, they're all in here. And it's also got ties to politicians. You can see it's got like Bush, Hillary Clinton. Hopefully I don't get suicided for talking about this, but it's all there. You can look at it for yourself. I'll provide these slides.
Donald Trump.
No. So now onto the Lightning Network. Lightning Network is not Bitcoin. Oh, forget it. The Lightning Network is a system that is not exchanging Bitcoins user to user. It's actually just IOUs for Bitcoin. It's basically like a database entry for an IOU for Bitcoin. So when you're exchanging value on the Lightning Network, it's really just a facade. So they've introduced this debt instrument, and it can be compared to the way people ended up using gold certificates instead of actual gold because they were easier to, they ended up being easier to transact around and pass on to people instead of carrying around this heavy thing that was actually stored in the bank. So that's a good comparison for the Lightning Network. And because of this, we learned from history, right? Lightning IOUs may one day exceed the value of their BTC backing. So they claim that it's strictly Austrian school economics, which was Satoshi's vision, but it's not. It's Keynesian. Keynesianism. economic system, which is actually a debt-based enslavement method. So over the long term, this has all been mathematically proven, by the way, through studies that many have conducted or just like done on their own. We cannot run a global economy on this system, especially when they're keeping the block size restricted at 1 megabyte. There's many problems with this, such as if there were to be some sort of a financial crisis or some sort of an issue with the Bitcoin or Lightning Network itself, and people wanted to cash out, they would then need to redeem their IOUs and go and settle all the transactions on chain. But because it's capped at 1 megabyte, nobody's going to get their transactions processed, and it's going to not end well at all. So we can then assume that as a result of this, all the usage of Bitcoin or Lightning, people will just accept the IOU system, which is Lightning, instead of transacting actual BTC, which is more secure. So it'll all be a debt instrument rather than actual currency, which is the important part. They claim that this is a peer-to-peer network, but in actuality, this results in a centralized star network, as they call it. So I'll show you a chart in a minute. It's a live view of the current Lightning mainnet, and it's already beginning to show signs of this. But the centralized Lightning network is a lot cheaper to maintain than so-called decentralized Lightning network. And what the end game is that these Lightning Network hubs are going to allow for the banks to jump in, and they will probably buy out some of the existing ones, like Living Room Satoshi. Wouldn't be surprised if that happens, because they're established and they've got channels with a great many people already. And basically, they will be the only ones who are able to keep their nodes online 24/7 and be able to maintain all the costs in running that. It's not going to be any kind of individuals and decentralized like they claim it's going to be, oh, everyone run your own node. No. So there was another analogy I heard earlier on from a bloke in the audience over here, and he said, well, first of all, you need to understand that opening Lightning channels and transacting value through the Lightning channels is kind of like an abacus. So if I open a channel with you and I'm transacting the value that's in that channel, it slides across like a bead. And if I've got channels, so they say it's going to be a big mesh of people with channels open everywhere, you can think of it like driving to work in the morning, and you have a path predetermined in your head, or a few paths where you want to go. And if you go towards one direction you want to go in your head, and someone else, actually another car drives onto that road before you do, you can't go down that path because the beat has been shifted across in the abacus. So now you have to determine another route to go down, and it just causes a lot of problems. And actually what's probably going to be the case in most instances is you have to open a brand new channel, or like create a brand new node and stake more Bitcoin up there in order to move that value around. So it's fundamentally flawed at that kind of a level. And basically, yeah, the banks win at the end of the day because, yeah, they're going to be the ones who can afford to operate such a system. And this is recreating the current financial system that we operate through today on Bitcoin. It's nothing like what it claims to be in the original white paper. So this is screenshots, but here's the actual website. It's lmmainnet.gaben.win if you want to go check it out for yourself. So while this loads, this is the Lightning Network right now in real time. And you can see very clearly that there is already a number of centralized hubs up there that are just connected with a majority of users, probably. And I believe how it is intended or designed to work in the end is these bigger ones, yeah, they're connected to many users, but they will also be directly connected with themselves. And that's kind of that's exactly how the system works today. All the banks are connected, and then the user or the customers are just like nodes, the individual nodes on their own. So they claim, oh, this is just because it's brand new, but I've been watching this since day one, and it's pretty much exactly the same. It's not going to change. It's just going to become even more centralized than it is right now. So, yeah.
The important point there is that if one of those large nodes goes down, it creates a possible settlement panic, and all those people that connect to those large nodes will like race against each other to settle on the blockchain.
Yeah, so if one of the larger nodes goes down, then it will create a settlement panic, and people will be basically stuck trying to cash out their IOUs for Bitcoin. It's a bit of a problem. So, Bitcoin Cash, it's the only Bitcoin version that remains true to the original white paper, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And there's a big misconception about how the chain split actually works. I've seen them recently trying to claim that Bitcoin Cash is just like an ICO airdrop, which is pretty laughable. It just demonstrates their lack of understanding in the space. You could kind of think of it like it operates like a tree branch that forks, right? And down one path, they're heading towards the store of value Lightning Network crap, and down this path, we're heading towards the peer-to-peer electronic cash system for the global adoption. And that's a fact that many people fail to understand, and it's probably down to the fact that this other group has retained the branding of Bitcoin, Bitcoin BTC instead of Bitcoin Cash. That's why they think it's like an altcoin or something, but that's just not how it works. We were forced to fork off because this hostile group corrupted it from within. They were in control of the GitHub. So we only had one option, to take this open source code and go back to the original roadmap. So that's where we're at today. And over the last couple of months, they said we would die, but in fact, merchant adoption is once again picking up. Everyone's preferring to transact on this one because it costs less than a cent. The fee to transact is literally unnoticeable. And we've gone back and we've increased the block size, first of all, to 8 megabytes when the chain split occurred. And now on May the 15th, they upgraded it to 32 megabyte block size, or allowed it to go to 32 megabyte block size. They also reactivated dormant codes, OP codes, that were not switched on by Bitcoin Core developers under the control of Blockstream. And now we can compete against coins like Ethereum that are doing smart contracts. It could have happened to Bitcoin, all this this big booming of industry interest could have been happening on Bitcoin in the last couple of years, but no, they didn't want any kind of innovation happening. They just wanted to, cripple it and shut it down. But I think it backfired on them in that way, in that regard, because when they crippled Bitcoin, they couldn't control other open source projects that started up, and they picked up the pieces, I guess you'd say. But now Bitcoin's back on track, and this is the only true cryptocurrency, I guess you could say, one coin to rule them all. I think it'll end up being like in the end. So yeah, that's basically all I had to say on that today. Do we have any kind of questions?
Yeah.
Pass that man the microphone.
So when you were talking about the routing issue from Bitcoin core of the Lightning Network,
Yeah.
you mentioned that it's as if you're driving, so let's say you want to drive to work in the morning, and when you get in the car, you kind of have the route plan in your mind where you want to go, and then as you start driving, the roads themselves start to like change directions because
Yes, exactly.
because of other people using those roads. Is that what you meant with?
Yes, because when you are connected to various individuals through different channels, they can route their transaction through you, through your channels that you've opened. That's the problem.
Yeah, so they use the same nodes that your channel, or that they use the same nodes that your route is using. So it imbalances those nodes, and it creates. It might prevent your transaction from going through. So it's as if like you're driving down to work, and then all of a sudden the road you always go down is blocked, and you now have to like go all the way back home, and then start a new trip.
Pretty much, yeah. That's basically how it works as an analogy. It's just not going to work.
I think that's an NP hard problem, isn't it? I think that's what Vitalik Buterin from Ethereum said. That it was that sort of dynamic routing is NP hard, so it wouldn't be very. It would lead the network to become more centralized because that's the only way it can really work with the Lightning Network holistically. So it just recreates the ecosystem.
Indeed, that's totally correct. Exactly what we've got today. It's not going to end up any different. And the bad part is it's all done by design. This is done by design. It's not just a bit of a fluke. This has been a hostile takeover. And if you think for a moment, why have they allowed this system to continue on and exist? It's because they're in control of it. So probably with more regulation.
Or took control.
Yeah.
They captured control.
Yes, exactly. Got another question over here.
So I've heard that for a long time the world was looking for a solution to double spending. So the world's been looking for digital cash for a long time now, and Bitcoin has solved that problem. So is the Lightning Network still utilizing the solving of the double spending problem, or does that not really matter now?
Well, they did introduce features like replace by fee, remember? Last year, which allowed you to double spend. So before that, there was the feature known as ZeroConf, and that meant you could send a transaction, and as a merchant, you could accept that transaction securely, knowing that it would appear in your wallet eventually. But then they added a feature because the blocks were congested, and if you sent too low a fee, the transaction was not getting processed. So you could send a second transaction and override the previous one in order to get the transaction through. So they actually enabled double spending basically more so than it was possible before.
They destroyed Bitcoin's killer feature.
Yeah.
There was actually, I saw a news article, I don't know if you saw this one, Hayden, there was a news article about a guy, a Bitcoin enthusiast in England, and some people broke into his house and held him at gunpoint and forced him to send them all of his Bitcoins. And he knew at the time that the network was congested and the fees were high. So he sent the transaction with a low fee. And these guys saw it come up in their wallet, as a like, oh, you've received money. They left. He just turned, as soon as they were gone, he turned around and did replace by fee, sent a transaction with a higher fee, high enough to get through, and redirected that money back into his own wallet. And the news article was all like, oh, isn't it wonderful that this guy was so clever to be able to, but actually what he's shown is that the network itself is broken.
Yeah, so
And as a merchant, there's no way for you to trust
those transactions until they confirm in the block.
And essentially, the spend issue, is that the chargebacks related to credit cards? Is it the same thing? No. No.
That's more of a refund. What Bitcoin, yeah, so chargebacks is more a problem with the credit card system where your money kind of hangs in limbo because when you pay with a credit card, you're not paying the merchant. You're asking your bank to pay the merchant's bank through another third party. And the money just kind of sits. And at any time within 90 days, you can go back to the third party, the Visa network, and say, I didn't make that payment. And then they'll just yank it from the merchant. Whereas on Bitcoin, once your transaction is in the block, basically that's it.
Yeah. I think it's also important to realize that with the current financial system, any money that you hold in a bank, it's an IOU essentially between you and the bank. You don't control that at all. And there's a reason why in Australia recently they just enabled faster bank transfers because cryptocurrencies were in the news and kind of threatening them. People are like, why would I use a bank when it takes so long to send a transaction to another bank? And all of a sudden, now we can transact pretty much instantly between banks. But there's a reason why it was slow beforehand. It's because it gives them more time to play with your money and do other things like earn interest on it. So it's just a really corrupt system and nobody realizes it. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. That 3 days in your fund, when you send someone money, and it used to spend 3 days in limbo, the banks actually speculate with that money. So they take your money that you've given them to hand to someone else, and they play with it for a couple of days. And if they got they make some money, and they keep the money they make, and they just give the person you're trying to pay whatever they were owed, and they keep the difference. And sometimes they lose money as well, and they've got to replace that with money from the treasury. Yeah, that's the whole game, and crypto just destroys that.
Yeah, the other problem is it's just a database entry. That's all your money is to them. Yeah. So I guess if that sums up all the questions, we can have a bit of a look at the markets.
I guess I just have one more sort of question, I guess, which is after all of this, which has happened with Gavin and with the takeover and the implementation of all of these kind of anti-features that they added into Bitcoin, do you think in the Bitcoin Cash community there's a real level of distrust for anybody that's kind of unknown, who's coming in or like that? I don't know.
Well, that Adam Back was an unknown who just came out of nowhere, and pretty sure he didn't own any Bitcoin. Like it was openly admitted he didn't own any at the time, and then somehow he got into the GitHub repository.
Yeah.
So
what happened there?
I don't know, but it's just ridiculous how that kind of happened, and I think people should have been a lot more careful at that point in time. I think Gavin and Andreessen was too trusting of people and should have been a lot more cautious because they backstabbed him.
I think the one great thing that's come out of it is that in Bitcoin Cash now we're seeing we have these multiple different implementations of the node software. So instead of like on Bitcoin BTC where you've got Bitcoin Core, and I think they also have Bitcoin XT, but only maybe 3% of nodes run. In Bitcoin Cash, we now have 6 node implementations actively being used, and at least another 2 in development. And it's through that decentralization of development that we're going to get around this kind of crap that happened.
Yeah. Well, what's also good to see, I guess this is part of the CoinGeek news as well. I think that people in this community now, the Bitcoin Cash community, who were the original hardcore Bitcoiners, most of them, they're learning from the mistakes, and the miners have learned as well, and they're realizing that they need to help support this ecosystem. So there was a deal made in Hong Kong where now the miners, the major pools, creating a treasury, and they will take money directly from their block rewards to go towards funding Bitcoin Cash projects. So there doesn't need to be any kind of outside investment or bribery accepted to further develop things in this network. It's self-sustaining now at this point in time. So that's another really good thing that has come through in recent times.
I believe there's been a word of caution urged that implementing the system incorrectly could be viewed by certain regulatory agencies as akin to setting up a derivative structure, or not a derivative structure, a dividend structure. And it's all about how it's implemented, but I think otherwise the news is very, very positive. Sends the right signals.
Right. Well, I'll just update everyone on like the direction of price, like I normally kind of do. So this is actually BTC against USD. So the reason why I'm looking at this, if you don't look at the charts, is that because everything still follows this price. So if this one's going up and down, generally everything else is going to follow it to a certain extent. So the important thing to look at here is this shape that I've got drawn with the pink lines. So it's going, you can see that it's consolidating across sideways in a symmetrical triangle formation. Now I've been looking at this one for a while. I don't know, but I probably even showed the last meetup. That's how long I've had it for. But a lot of people are now starting to look at this one. And basically we're coming to the end of consolidation probably within another month. It starts to get to the end of this shape. Now, what it could mean is that actually this is a continuation pattern that it can go down further, or we could break up, because patterns sometimes don't go against, they do go against their textbook definition. So the best way to play this is wait for it to break out to either side and then react accordingly. So if the price starts to break down below this line, then you can sell or short. And if it breaks up above this line, then buy or go long, basically. And now onto the Bitcoin Cash chart. So let's go down to a smaller time frame. So there was a falling wedge here on the left side of the screen, which we passed a while ago. And here I've got in a major horizontal level. You should be able to see more clearly how that is relevant on the bigger time frame. So this is clearly a level of support and resistance. And recently, from falling down here at this resistance, we've now bounced off support or resistance, which is now turning back into support again. And looking at the smaller time frames, we are trending down in a parallel channel. So once again, this is Bitcoin Cash against US dollar. And at this current point in time, we're at the upper resistance of the channel. So once it breaks out of that, we can probably expect it to go up higher again, start heading up.
Is it possible to predict when that would happen, or it's just
got to wait for it to happen? Yeah, majority of trading is done by computer algorithms or bots. So the good traders are not sitting there with their eyes glued to the screen half the time. I like to rely on both alarms and setting like predetermined orders. So like if it passes a certain point, a certain price level, enter this trade, or but yeah, I'm generally keeping an eye on it most of the time because I rely on alarms, and that's been working really well. And it just helps me confirm those trades also.
What are the blue lines?
That's an indicator called the Bollinger Bands. You're talking about these ones that are surrounding the price, right? Yeah. That's an indicator called Bollinger Bands. They're kind of irrelevant, but at this point in time on my charts. But I use that, people use that to kind of get a measure of volatility on certain time frames. So the bands will be tightening on the price when it is consolidated to a certain level. And when the price is breaking out and having big moves, these bands expand. So you can kind of judge when a big move is approaching, depending on how tight they are, particularly on the larger time frames like 1 day. Now we've got Bitcoin Cash against Bitcoin. Again, you can see here I've marked in a horizontal level, so you can see this level's been rejected here, it's bounced here, here, here. And now again on this fall down, we have just bounced off this level and it's confirmed as support. If you've been at the previous meetups, we were looking at this falling wedge, you might recall. So that's just a good example of trading the breakout. So you had plenty of time to see that the price came out here and go long or buy more Bitcoin Cash or sell your Bitcoin for Bitcoin Cash. And that was a really good trade. I posted about that one on Twitter when it happened.
So that, at the beginning of that green, that big breakout, what kind of time frame is that over? Is that like
What, the whole move?
Yeah.
Let's see. So you can measure with this tool. To the peak, it was about nearly 3 weeks. It was 19 days.
Okay, so
19
you
days.
said a lot of time. It's not like.
Well, yeah, that's how long this move lasted upwards before it started trending back down again, but now it's bounced. So this is an area where the bulls have placed buy orders and reloaded basically for further upside. Now, just for those who haven't seen this chart before, if you're looking at the bigger picture, there's this area at the top here where I've got a blue box, and I've got a little note here that this is a major resistance level basically, and if the price can clear that zone, then Bitcoin Core is in a lot of trouble. So once it breaks through the resistance levels, right, it will continue on a lot further.
So that when it did break that was that big pump at the beginning of November.
Yeah, that can just be attributed to volatility. There's a bit of a spike here.
That was
it's not the same on every exchange, just on this particular exchange, you can see that one. But yeah, it's at this zone, it's about 0. If you wanted to hear a bit more about CoinGeek, I've actually got a few photos, I think. I took a lot of photos of some of these slides, so you can just kind of go through them. But so I don't know how good you can see that. That's right. This is Jimmy Wynn talking at the moment, and basically he's just illustrating how the chain split works. Probably won't get through all of these because running low on battery, but yeah, we've gone up from Bitcoin Core 1 megabyte blocks to 8 megabytes, now 32 megabytes. And they're doing testing at the moment for 1 terabyte blocks, which has been going successfully. It's talking a bunch about merchant adoption on Bitcoin Cash, re-enabling the OP codes that were disabled, stuff that's going on with N-Chain. They're developing the high-level scripting language so that we can create smart contracts on Bitcoin Cash. Jian Wu from Brisbane talking about ICO Live. Basically, he said here that the miners can support unlimited on-chain throughput by increasing the block size indefinitely, but they do need to set a limitation when necessary to prevent the denial of service attacks, which was originally why they implemented a 1 megabyte block size in the past. There's the Bitcoin ABC developer Armory talking about Bitcoin Core. There's a slide of the market dominance going down after they implemented these 1 megabyte block size cap. It's talking about Bitcoin Cash. There on out. Okay, so this was Centbeat giving a presentation on their wallet that's coming soon. There's going to be things like a good merchant system implemented in this app that people can just download, and also you'll be able to do cool stuff like texting contacts in your phone and also have the app downloaded. You don't need to get their wallet address, essentially. It just recognizes they have a phone number. They also use an app. This is Cointext, which we know about. We've already talked about this before, and you can text people Bitcoin Cash. You don't need a real cryptocurrency wallet, and it's good for onboarding people. Then Craig Wright talked about atomic swaps. Basically said that big things are coming for Bitcoin Cash, and we'll be able to tokenize every atom in the universe on Bitcoin Cash because it can actually scale to that kind of a level, and other coins are going to end up becoming side chains of Bitcoin Cash because they can't scale what Bitcoin Cash can. Roger giving his usual talk. There's a few of his slides that he's had on YouTube before. Like this one's pretty good. He's comparing the two versions of which one's the most Bitcoin. And right now, Bitcoin Core just has the most proof of work, but that's the one thing we need to fully become Bitcoin as we used to know it. But right now, we're still more Bitcoin than the other version. Let's talk about blocks becoming full. Merchants drop Bitcoin. The transactions per day are dropping at the moment on Bitcoin Core, and as we know, more transactions on the network is directly correlated with the price growth in the long term. And since that's been basically stopped, the price is not going up at the moment, and people are wondering like, oh, why isn't the price going up? When can I get my Lambo? That's just not how it works. The problems that were caused to Bitcoin by human failure, so Bitcoin Core, Adam Back, Greg Maxwell, and Samson Now. There's some statements that they've made. They've made many that are quite incriminating what they intend on doing with Bitcoin. So it's not good. And he's saying, Roger's saying that people need to forget about hodling. Developers need to be building services that incentivize usage, and people need to forget hodl. If you want to spread adoption and grow this coin globally, you need to be spending at merchants and spending to other people to transact your value. So he reckons go invest in companies that help promote usage, and then you can profit from the increased value of your holdings because